Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Welcome to Campus Consortium Foundation's First Impression Last Seamless and Secure Onboarding Strategies for the First Time Students. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or questions pane in the Zoom control panel. Now, I would like to pass the platform to Dr. Carl Horvath, President and CEO of Campus Consortium Foundation.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome to everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join our webinar today. We have over 40 institutions that have registered for this event and many attending now from all over the country. I'm just going to call out a few institutions that are with us, and that would be University of Central Arkansas, Oral Roberts University, University of Winnipeg. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining. University of Texas at Arlington, University of Kansas, Irvine Valley College. We have Alaska Career College. We have Lakeland Community College, College of DuPage, and many, many more. And the type of people attending are varied, and this is not all about information technology. It's about student experience and engagement and student service. And so because of that, many of our attendees are dean of students or director of online technology or other academic lecturers, professors, student service engagement professionals from institutions who want to make sure that their student engagement that depends more and more on technology is seamless and what students expect today. So thank you for joining. We have a great panel of presenters who will talk about their experiences and their ideas with identity and access management and how it's made a difference in their institution. You are joining a webinar from Campus Consortium Foundation. It's an education technology association to help higher education and some K-12s with technology. And we always invite new members to join so we can serve and support you as well. So if you have interest, please let us know. Also, this week, Campus Consortium Foundation is celebrating Identity and Access Management Week all week. And if you visit our website, you will see a number of activities and events. We've had some discussion roundtables this week. We have our Keystone event, which is this webinar. We have, as you can see on our webpage on the bottom right, Ask an IM Expert anytime. You can pose a question about identity and access management, and we'll have an expert standing by to answer those questions. We have tips, tricks, blog posts, you name it, it's there. So please visit our website and participate in some of the activities if you get a chance. Also today, one of our identity and access management partners, Quick Launch, is offering, in collaboration with us and exclusively through the consortium, an in-kind grant with a fair market value of $20,000 to $40,000 for implementation. If you have an interest in that and want to find out more, please contact Jennifer Brown. We do have a number of poll questions, about 4 of them, that we'll ask today. And this is used to create a report, an EdTech report at the end that we will send out to everyone. Could you please take 30 seconds, audience, to answer this poll question? How confident are you in your institution's ability to manage and control access to data, essential systems, and workflows? Highly confident, somewhat confident, or not confident? The answers will not identify who has answered the question, but we will take all these answers and we will create charts and analyze the data and produce a report at the end for you to see what most of the people answered and what trends that you can identify that may be of use to your institution. Today, we have 2 very good presenters, Eugene from Ferrum College and Al Santos from Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary. I'm excited to get to talk with them to hear about their identity and access management journey. Just a little setup to give the audience and the attendees a grounding or a orientation for what we're talking about. And this can help some of the people who may not be IT folks. But the outcomes we'll be talking about, which are definitely not technical, which is how it impacts the student experience. But a big part of this is identity and access management. These are systems that are the gateway to everything that we use in and out of education. Think about your finances, think about healthcare, think about retail. All these have identity interfaces to authenticate who you are. And education is no different. And the expectation is of our students that the authentication, the identity and access is as good as what they have every day with all these other platforms that they use. Looks like the results of our first poll is in. It looks like about 44% are highly confident, and 33 are somewhat, and 22 are not so confident. And, that's pretty consistent among some of the previous polls that we've done. So it's not bad to be classified in any one of those three. We are here to help you, your institution, no matter what stage you're at. So these are some key aspects of identity and access management, student, faculty, and staff management, and centralizing and securing your data, your applications, your systems to make sure people get to the right thing. And it's not just about the security, it's about the path of travel, how much time it takes or how difficult it is for students, faculty, and staff to access what they need to do their work. And of course, we'll be hearing from our panelists today about benefits of identity and access management in terms of automation and security. And we will touch on some emerging trends that make it a more user-friendly experience to authenticate yourself that are gaining traction and will become standard in the future. Higher education has challenges with identity access, and that is that many of our institutions don't have the resources that for-profits or corporations do. So they have old systems that have been patched together and built over years. They have to be very cognizant of the student life cycle, which is very seasonal, and it continues to change on a regular basis. So that's a challenge. And the unusual privilege access structures for not just students, but faculty, part-time workers, adjunct faculty, alumni, and vendors, and many others. So there are unique challenges in higher education that many other organizations don't have. We're going to hit you with one more poll question, and that is identify identity and access management issues or challenges at your institution. Our institution has a limited staff and resources, and you're concerned that perhaps identity and access management is too complex to support. Multiple remote users, guests, alumni, vendors, and others need access may be a challenge. Identity and access management implementation and maintenance cost is a concern. Or community adoption is a big issue. We don't have training and support. So if you just take 30 seconds to answer that, I will introduce our first panelist, Al Santos. And Al has many years of experience in information technology, specifically the strategic planning, systems architecture, application development, and any number of IT solutions delivery. And he's done that in very large enterprises. and he has a experienced acumen and leadership style in building, mentoring, and motivating his staff. Can't do it as a leader without your team. And Al is very good at marshaling resources and getting everybody on the same page and getting the job done. He's has significant experience in multiple aspects of IT and delivers very complex projects to end users and to the outcomes that they expect to see. Here's our latest poll results. Looks like our second poll, most of our users are concerned about multiple remote users. This is 89%. Multiple remote users, guest alumni, vendors, and others who need access. And then the next one is limited staff and resources. That is an ongoing struggle for so many institutions. So thank you for answering that poll. We'll make sure we get this out to you. And I would like to hand the platform over to Al. Al, please fill in anything about your career or about Mid-Atlantic Baptist Theological Seminary.
I think you did a pretty good job. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate for the introduction. Go ahead and go to the next slide, if you could. Excellent. So a little bit about Mid-America. We're located in Memphis, Tennessee, home of Elvis and Great Barbecue. And in Mid-America, we have two schools. We have the seminary, where we offer master's divinity and pastoral in doctoral degrees in pastoral ministries, biblical counseling, theology, and so on. And then we also have the college, where we offer undergraduate studies in associates and bachelors in organizational leadership, business administration, communications, and so on. So that's a little bit about Mid-America. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Carl. So when I came to Mid-America a little over 2.5 years ago, we had disparate access to our applications. It's not uncommon to most institutions where you use different applications for functions, and it's something that our faculty, our staff, and students use, and you'll see that on the next slide later on. But there wasn't a uniform way for our users to access the application. Some, they save it on bookmarks on their browsers, or they create desktop shortcuts. The problem with that is if they happen to use a new computer or a different computer, those shortcuts or bookmarks are not there. And the major problem that we really had are the multiple credentials for the different applications that are used by the users, primarily the students. So each application has their own authentication and authorization mechanisms, and the users have to remember their credentials for these different systems, which then results in IT help desk calls. And we get calls about forgot the username, we forgot passwords, accounts being locked, and password resets. And depending on how tech savvy that you're helping, the person that you're helping, it could be a 5-minute call, or it could be a 50-minute call, depending on when you're helping them with their issue. So it could result in a productivity drain on our side with helping the different kinds of issues. And in the beginning of the semester, we would get anywhere average from 3 to 5 calls a week when new students are trying to get access to the applications. Even though we provide detailed instructions and pictures of them, they still get these issues. At the same time, there's a delay in password resets and account resolution because our IT help desk is only available during office hours. We don't have night or weekend support. So challenge is if a person happens to have a problem accessing their applications during the weekend, it won't be until Monday morning where they can get some help in resolving that issue. So there's a prolonged resolution turnaround time for addressing some of these issues. And Carlo, thank you. So this is the landscape and what it looks like at that time, where you see the user in the middle, and it was not an optimal experience for the user, for faculty or staff and students, because they're accessing all these different applications. There are main applications that our users use. There's Genzabar Santos, which is our student information system. That's our system of record for that. There is Canvas, which is our learning management system, where students access their courses, learning materials. There's Office 365 for email and Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, presentations, Excel. And then there's EBSCO, which is our online library for ebooks and journals for research. So the burden is put on the user to try to remember all of these different locations to go to, either through bookmarks or shortcuts, but also remembering the credentials that they need to use to access these different systems. At the same time, there are also websites or pages in our websites that students go to, like the library to check out books, or registrar's webpage, or publications and things of that nature, campus calendar for them to look to, but they have to do searches and do navigation through the website. So there's a lot of management on an end user to try to remember where to go and what credentials to use for accessing the applications and materials. So if you can go to the next page, Carl, thank you. So for us, we settled on using identity access management in single sign-on portal. For us, we use Quick Launch. So rather than putting the burden on a user, we put the burden on the identity access platform to manage the user's credentials, to manage accessing the different applications in that regard. So for us, Quick Launch managed the credentials. So they only need to remember one username and one password to access the applications. They only need to use the portal to get to all the different areas and different applications that they have to go to. So it federated the credentials, but also centralized the different applications that they need to go to, rather than creating shortcuts or bookmarks. So it's really a one-stop shop for the user, primarily for the students, to really get to the different things that they need to get to for accessing their student information system, their courses, their email, and research. And this is our portal that we use for that. And that's perfectly fine. So this is what it looks like when a user accesses our portal. There's the sign in. And we use Active Directory through Azure to do the authorization and authentication of the users. One thing I do want to mention is the identity access management tool that we use have what's called an adaptive multi-factor authentication, which is really helpful. Because if the user happens to use the same computer, the same browser, or always logs in from the same location, whether it's dorm or their house, they only need to enter their username and password and they'll get into the portal. But if any of those parameters changes, if they use a different browser, use a different computer, or they log in a different location outside of their region, because some of our students goes on missions trips overseas, then it will trigger the multi-factor authentication. It will then, after you put your username and password, it will ask for either security questions or do a verification code through phone or email. So it's a nice way to be able to really secure the login, depending on whether the users are using the application in a particular location or in a different location. And another thing that's also helpful is the console gives us a global map of where the users are logging in. So then we can see where they're located, where they're logging in. So it's from a security perspective, it's a great awareness if it happens to be a login in a suspicious area where we have no students. So it's a good way to be able to manage that as well. And if you can go to the next slide, Carl, thank you. So here is what the portal looks like. And this is the portal for the student. And within the platform, you can create different portal views based on the profile. We have a profile for students, a profile for faculty and instructors, a profile for staff. And depending on a profile, we can put different applications available to them and even order the priority of the applications. So in this case, this is a student profile. So we put the applications on top, that's more commonly used or most often used applications such as email, Canvas for learning management, Santos for the information system, and so on. And it even has the ability to, in this case, Office 365, if you can even have a application tile for Outlook and a separate one for OneDrive to minimize clicks so that students can get to the particular tools that they needed. And here we also put the web pages, basically the shortcuts to the web pages, so that way they're not having to navigate, do searches. They can go directly to the web page for the library, for the registrar's office, for the campus calendar. So it really is a one-stop shop for our students. It's really been a game changer for them. We received emails how this has significantly simplified and made it easier for them to access everything that they need through a portal and using one credentials only, minimizing any confusion regarding that. And with this solution, it is pretty much eliminated our help desk calls regarding password resets, account lockouts, because the platform allows self-service tools. So in the event the user forgets their password or puts in their password multiple times incorrectly, there's a self-service function where they can do verification that it is the right person, and they can reset their password. So then this really did eliminate those types of calls for our help desks regarding authentication and authorization to those different applications. And that's it for us on my side.
Al, thank you. I wanted to ask you a bit about, you did refer to getting communication from users, that would be students, faculty, and staff, about the improvement in how they access their resources. But then you also mentioned about the added security, which was the multi-factor authentication. And it sounds like you've unbound the campus population, so it doesn't matter where they go, the system will understand where they are and apply extra controls to ensure their identity and that they have permission to access what they have to. So I guess you've gotten the emails, and it's also, the evidence has been a decrease in the amount of work that IT has had to provide in terms of support.
Yes, definitely. And when I mentioned, because it comes in cycles, so usually the very beginning of the semester where we have new students, we would get, I say 3 to 5, but it's typically more than that the first week, and eventually it'll trail off. But then sometimes we also still get even current students who get frustrated, and sometimes they go on summer break and then they come back in the fall and totally forget their passwords and all of that. So you do get that to where, because the platform allows for the self-service, which has been a big factor in eliminating those types of help desk calls, they can fix it themselves and reset their own passwords by asking the security questions or sending verification code via text or their personal email. So it's been that kind of a game changer for us.
That's great. I mean, you've really gone throughout your institution and kind of gathered everything into a central point of access, even though it may not be centrally located, but it's that pathway to get to them seems like, oh, one-stop shop, and really does improve the student experience. So they're not calling the help desk and or sending emails or having to jump on a chat or pick up the phone. So yeah, that's great improvements. Thank you for that, Al. And let me go to the next poll. Choose the technologies and services. Looks like everybody's already got on this question and answered it. And 89% say single sign-on as one set of credentials for apps that Al just talked about in his portal that are accessed by the campus community. And the next one is multi-factor authentication, increasingly important as we have more students, faculty, and staff accessing technology to do whatever they need to do. That increase has profoundly changed since especially the pandemic. And so thank you everyone for taking the time to answer that poll question. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Eugene Hacker, who is a proud graduate of Ferrum College and serves his alma mater in the critical role of Assistant Chief Information Officer. Eugene is responsible for operations and training the staff and mentoring his staff. So many IT leaders in education have to do that to create the staffing that is adequate for supporting the institution, and works closely with the CIO to establish priorities and strategy and long and short-term plans. Eugene, thanks for joining us today, and please tell us about Ferrum College, and I'm going to hand the platform over to you next.
All right, thank you so much for the intro, Carl. Yeah, so I've been at Ferrum for a while now. It's kind of home to me. On the next slide, we've got some other points, so I can kind of tell you a little bit about Ferrum. So Ferrum College, located in Ferrum, Virginia, founded in 1913. It's a beautiful 700-acre campus. In the little picture here, you can kind of see the scenery. We're surrounded by mountains right here in the Blue Ridge. We've got 60 academic programs. We are also home to the Blue Ridge Institute and Museum, which includes a lot of artifacts and such with the Appalachian culture and surrounding area, as well as our farm museum. And we were right alongside the Crooked Road. If anybody knows anything about that, it is the Appalachian music culture. So this is where it happened. So that's a little bit about Ferrum. So let's look at some of the things that we're doing here at Ferrum. So our pre-identity and access management environment. So this is where we came from. So we had separate account management per application. So a lot of what Al was describing here. So we would have account creation, password resets, everything per application. So users had to know a password for their email login, their LMS, any of the various applications that we use. And when you start listing them all, you start developing a list, and you have more applications than you thought you do. We didn't use multi-factor authentication. Again, this was just all username and password, and we just relied on users to remember their passwords. And at the time, I mean, this is coming from when best practice was to have a separate password for every single application. And it still is. And I mean, this was, we would encourage the use of password managers if the user was so inclined to download a password manager and use that to keep things separate. But there again, I mean, a lot of that was just generating a ton of help desk calls. It was a lot more support than really we needed to do. So account creation, we were relying on custom scripts and applications that we developed in-house, doing CSV exports and, uploading them to various products, doing a download from our student information system. And, there's a lot of PowerShell and some other scripting languages running in the background. So we didn't really have any kind of a true identity management. I mean, we used Active Directory. We did have an ADFS server on campus, so we had some sort of access management, but for our internal applications. And I mean, we started transitioning to putting a lot of this stuff in the cloud. Our LMS is in the cloud. Some of our, critical workloads now hosted in the cloud. So we're in this mixed environment. And all we had was really access management on premise. So that was becoming a little bit of a problem because, it created, there again, additional user logins where they had to remember those additional credentials. And then, our on-premise applications, again, they could sync with our Active Directory. Cloud-based applications, it depends. Some of them could, some of them couldn't. And you had, outside resources that, for example, library resources, where it wasn't really a login, but it was looking at, well, where are you coming from? Where, it's whitelisted type of authentication, saying that, okay, well, you're from this campus, so you have access to be able to use these sort of credentials. So again, we were going into this hybrid environment, and that kind of led us to think about, what are we doing with identity access, and is there a better way to do that? All right, so the old way. Let's talk about some of the stumbling blocks here. So, again, I touched on this a little bit. We're following best practices, which said at that time, separate password for everything. So you'd have people forgetting, we would do password resets. So it was also a kind of a learning curve for our staff, because, you would have any kind of a turnover or, change in role or whatever, or, some of our help desk crew, we employ a lot of students to run our help desk alongside us. So, we have work studies that work with us between class. And so we're constantly training them. And so there's only so much, access that we can give them, which we give them a fair amount, but, to be able to reset passwords, to be able to help users, and to be able to give them login to all of these different platforms that we have. So, users were reusing the same passwords anyway, is what we found, and they're just using the same password for everything, and often, easy passwords. And then, when they would change the password in one place, they would forget that they changed it in another place. And so then they would say, well, I forget what my password is here. I used to be able to log in. And then they'd remember that they changed their password. And, so it just led to confusion. We didn't introduce multi-factor yet. So that was one layer of security that we were still lacking. And some users, the more savvy ones, they had a fair experience, I guess, if they did everything right, and, they remembered where they changed their password at. But, onboarding was kind of a big deal too, because you'd have to walk each user through setting up all of these things. You can provide instructions, but it was just confusing. So, and then, you'd have other scenarios where you have name changes. Someone gets married and changes their name, and now you've got to change a name in, 15 different systems. You've had situations where a student would now become an employee, and now you're having to go back through and, either provision a new account or make changes in another account. So just managing, just that kind of data in the account became cumbersome. Next slide. All right, so these are some of the key reasons here, and I think I've hinted at some of them already. So our user experience was lacking. So we needed a way to unify all the existing platforms that we had into just one common solution. So we needed to make it simple for people, because whether it's an employee that we were bringing on board or a student, I've found that the further we go, the more we kind of advance our technology, give them new things. It's not only are we introducing the number of resources that are available to them, but now they're having to change everything all over again and create new accounts and log in a different way. So again, simplifying just managing our end users. And then, of course, we wanted a way to improve security. So having one common identity access solution and one common place where they would have, like multi-factor authentication made a whole lot of sense. And then finally, when we're looking at provisioning those accounts, as a final step to that, we also looked at, okay, well, what would it look like if not only did we give them this sort of seamless layer to be able to log in one place and have everything right in front of them. But what if we can start automatically provisioning to these various applications? All right. So we had a few requirements. Everybody's got their things, their special cases. So our student information system, we use Ellucian Colleague. A lot of schools are either Colleague or Banner or some flavor of Ellucian. So our student information system had to remain the source of truth, and a lot of that had to do with the position that it is, being that we're in a hosted managed position. So a lot of that, we couldn't have a lot of, customizations, and they had special rules around, what's allowed to actually integrate directly with it and that sort of thing. So we didn't want to interface directly with it. So we provisioned ours a different way and said, well, okay, we want our information system to provision to Active Directory. And then from there, everything else takes the Active Directory account and auto provisions to the various accounts. So we onboarded, we're a Google campus. We onboarded Gmail, Brightspace, product of D2L, that's our LMS, and Office 365. We started with that. We started easy. And then from there, we automated the account creation once we had the single sign-on, and that looked pretty good. Then we did account automation to those various areas. And that right there, not only did it reduce the work on us as an IT staff, but out of the box, it made it so much easier for our users to start getting logged into them, because those are, sort of the core components that any student or employee is going to need right off the bat. They need their email, they need access to the LMS, and then, of course, the Office products that they have as well. And then finally, as a third phase to this, once we got those two layers, we introduced campus-wide multi-factor authentication. All right, so the automated provisioning, I'll touch base on our experience with that. So our SIS hosted environment, again, those restrictions that I said where it prevented interactions from third parties directly. That's where we had had provisioned to Active Directory, and then from there, Identity Access pulled that from Active Directory every time that there's a change, and redirected those accounts to provision those in the different apps. Again, we started off with just a handful of apps to start with, and then grew over time over the past couple of years. So Brightspace and Gmail, I mean, we automated that based on Active Directory accounts, as well as, really the Microsoft Office, and I mean, there's several other products in there that interface as well. All right, so multi-factor. So when we looked at this, originally we thought, well, multi-factor, that's going to be kind of a big thing, because for us, we were also still supplying alumni with email accounts, retiree with alumni with email accounts. So you accumulate many user accounts over time, as well as, our current people, our current employees, our current students. So we needed something that was easy to deploy and manage. And so my experience with it is once you get, your communication out and you tell people that, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this, you stretch out the communication over a few months while you're, testing it, getting it set up. And it was actually a whole lot easier than I thought. We basically configured the policy, turned it on, and it just started working. One of the things that we did ahead of time too is we, as we were going through this and we had our users setting up their accounts as a first-time user, I'll touch on this in a little bit. We had them, answer security questions, provide their alternate email or cell phone number to, be able to text a reset to, so that way they could self-manage. And since all of that was in there, when we turn on multi-factor authentication, we're able to just use the same contact methods that they already provided. And the very first time it was asking them for that additional credential, it was already built in and they already had it. So when we flipped the switch, it was probably one of the easiest security layers that we've added. Now with the caveat that they have to read their email and they have to receive that notification. Most of our end users, it was very seamless. We told them it was coming and it just worked out of the box. But you know, there were some, again, we had alumni, we had retirees that were still in there. And at the time, especially with Google, they didn't give you the option to separate, you know, which ones you would like to use a third party IAM. So it was either all or nothing. So since then, they've come off of that and now you can choose it. So you can have a Google container in there of the people that you want to receive single sign-on versus those that you just want to receive just, you know, the Google logon. So if you have users in there like alumni that are going to stay in there forever that don't need access to everything, it makes it a whole lot easier to do that. All right. So what did we solve in all of this? So reduced password resets, without a doubt, because now they're able to do it on their own. So it saves our crew time. You know, I know most of our staffs, I mean, none of us, speaking for IT, you know, we're always operating on kind of a bare minimum crew, you know. So you got to use your time wisely, and if you can get back some of that time with some of these lesser calls during the day. Just to give you an idea, like in the beginning of the school year, when we would have students calling for the first time, you know, when they're logging in, it would be, you know, can you reset my password? How do I log in? How do I do this? And it's actually shifted it. So instead of doing it at the beginning of the year, we're doing it through the summer as they're getting set up and ready to come in. By the time they set foot on campus, they've already stepped into their single sign-on dashboard. They've already seen all the applications that they've access to. They've already logged into their email, their LMS, and everything. And so all they need to do is they come on campus, and the biggest question now is, you know, hey, how do I get my PlayStation on the network? So it's a whole lot easier than what it used to be. You know, again, self-management over breaks. I can't speak enough about that. I mean, you know, our staff rotates when we shut down for a winter break for, you know, about a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on the calendar year, which is great. One of the best perks. But, you know, we would pick a day where someone would log in and, you know, look at help desk tickets to make sure that we're still staying on top of everything. And now, I mean, it's very rare. I mean, we might have 1 or 2 tickets during that time just because, you know, everything during that time is remote and it all just works and they have access to self-manage. And if they need to reset a password, you know, they can just do that now. You know, first-time users, when they're claiming their credentials for the very first time, you know, the only thing they need is just a couple of key pieces of information: their email account that we give them and their student ID number that they'll get in an acceptance letter. And so they provide that. It gives them a place to put in their password, and now they have access to set their security questions, set their password reset options. They have their dashboard, and it's a very, very streamlined process. So I mean, it's enhanced. I think it's enhanced just by doing these little steps. I mean, our student experience very much. I think it's a whole lot more seamless than what it was, you know, say 5 years ago. So it's simplified account creation, greater security because now we're using multi-factor. So they've got to have that additional factor, and way easy management for the IT staff. We've grown from, you know, just a handful of apps to about 35 apps in our dashboard. So for those of you looking at, you know, identity access, it's it's definitely a great time to start.
All right. Very good, Eugene. That's a very interesting journey. You broke it up into sections so you could manage it. I would imagine the important thing that I heard you saying was the impacts to the end users, for students especially, and faculty and staff too, is that you addressed blockers that they had to being able to access resources and complete what they had to do. So whether it's students who had to access resources for courses, or faculty who had to post or grade information, then you took it a chunk at a time, single sign-on, and then you added layers of security, but you balanced that against usability. And so between what Al described and what you described for Ferrum, it sounds like you're making the technology recede into the background with what you're doing, even though you're introducing these enterprise systems that are complex. The complexity reduces for the end users, and that's what we want. And that's what I would imagine we have several academic and student service attendees on this call today, this webinar today, and they don't care about the technical side. What's the experience like for that student who's coming to Ferrum or to Mid-America and wanting to interact, especially prospective students, first-time students? This is their first impression of your institutions. And so I would imagine that that first impression has to be pretty seamless, where they don't notice that they've been onboarded and they can access everything. And so I would, want to just ask both of you just briefly about that usability, about that first-time student experience, and how they engage with all those resources that we've all become so much more dependent on, especially since the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way that you put it. And really what a first-time user wants is they just want to be able to log on. They're excited, right? They're excited of being accepted to your university, and they want to just be able to access the resources. Like, what can I go and see? What can I do before I even get there? So I think that part of that experience is just, it's building them up to, before they even set up on campus, before they see their dorm room, before they come on campus. You don't want the process to be a long, drawn out process where they have to, do a whole lot of setup. I think the goal in this is that we do a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes to set this up, so that all they need to do is they go in, they log into one place, and then they have all of the resources just in a nice list that they can access in some place that's organized. And I think, when you start removing that high tech, aspect from it, like, oh, I got to go and I've got to set up an account here, and now I've got to set up an account over here. Instead of setting up an account, you're just asking a few basic questions to just verify that, that's the user that's logging in. And then, what they realize is that everything else is all set up for them. And then, going beyond the technology, now the only thing they have to worry about is, all right, well, all of my accounts are set up. I set that up really easy. So now, what am I gonna, bring for my dorm room? How am I going to set that up? What else is there to do on campus? And that way they can start looking at these things and just become more excited about the day to day.
And just to add, Carl, what Eugene is saying, the same thing, it's really eliminating the barriers of those types of complexities for the user. They're going to have enough of that when they take their classes and courses. That's another level of complexity. But in terms of having to manage the technology it's really just eliminating those types of confusion or issues so that they can get to the business of learning what they came to learn in the institutions, whether it's Ferrum or Mid-America. And to what Eugene mentioned, it's a lot of work on the back end side. What I mean by that, it's more planning than anything. But it also speaks to the platform on the ease of use of implementing the platform. Because I saw a question here on the Q&A, how do you manage to implement this with limited staff? When I implemented this 2.5 years ago, it was just me implementing it, working with the different vendors, the SIS tool, the EBSCO and others. But once that connection was made, the implementation and turning it on was, and I've had my share of security implementations and Federation. This was really, in my experience, once we had that connection set up, it was very easy. I haven't had any issues since. So anyway, that's been my experience with the tool.
Oh, that's great. Good feedback from both of you. Thank you for responding to the question in the chat from our audience. And here's our last poll question. What IT security questions do you ask your identity and access management vendor? We don't ask security questions. We focus on functionality. We regard our IAM platform as a form of security, or we ask our IAM vendor for a security report annually. If you could just take 30 seconds to answer our last poll question, attendees, we would appreciate that very much. And I want to thank both our panelists today, Eugene Hacker and Al Santos, for sharing their identity and access management journey. And ultimately, this impacts everybody in their institutions with every system they touch, with every work activity they do. They need to be authorized and identified to be able to do it. And they have made this as easy as possible so the technology doesn't get in the way. And so they really have impacted the operational efficiency of how the entire institution operates. Here's the results of our last poll. What IT security questions do you ask? Most folks are asking their vendor for a security report annually, which when you do choose a identity and access management vendor, that you do should check to make sure they can provide the documentation that you will need for controls, for your financial audits or regulatory requirements. And many of the experienced education, identity, and access management vendors will have this documentation available for you on a regular basis. And looks like we're split on the other two questions. So thank you. We will aggregate this information and get it out to you in a report. One last reminder about this in-kind grant through our IAM partner Quick Launch. If you have interest in that, please contact Jennifer Brown at Campus Consortium. We want to thank our panelists and all our attendees that participated and contributed to this webinar. I want to thank Jennifer. I want to thank Nicole from Campus Consortium Foundation for all their hard work in helping us put this together, and the rest of the Campus Consortium event management team. Our next webinar is July 10th. And it is called Supporting the Student Journey Through AI, Artificial Intelligence. Please join us for that. And I appreciate everybody's attendance today and for taking the time. Thank you, Eugene and Al. I hope you have a great rest of the day.